touch of formaldehyde, a pinch of acetaldehyde, a splash of acrolein makes the perfectly evil vape cloud.
Vaping can expose you to a toxic mix of chemicals. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Sometimes words seem so unnecessary. Introducing Unspoken, the new diamond fashion collection you'll only find at Jared Jewelers, and just in time for the holidays. Discover the brilliance of natural diamond pendants, rings, earrings, and bracelets in a range of carat weights, expertly interwoven in white or yellow 14-karat gold. It's the perfect holiday gift where your love speaks for itself. Unspoken, the dazzling new collection, exclusively at Jared.
The most innovative companies are going further with T-Mobile for Business, like Delta Airlines. Together with T-Mobile for Business, Delta Airlines is putting 5G into the hands of ground staff so they can better assist on-the-go travelers with real-time information. From the Delta Sky Club to the Jet Bridge, this is elevating customer experience. And Tractor Supply trusts 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to connect over 2,200 stores around the country with 5G business internet. Plus, T-Mobile is powering AI solutions so Tractor Supply team members can match shoppers with the products they need faster. This is enriching customer experience. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Introducing Celebration Key, your key to paradise. Unlock Carnival's all-new exclusive destination at Grand Bahama, where you can dive into clear lagoons, try all the water sports, or unwind on a mile-long pristine beach with breathtaking sunset views. This vacation paradise has it all. Celebration Key, welcoming guests in summer 2025. Carnival, choose fun.
Copyright 2024 Carnival Corporation, all rights reserved. Ships registry, the Bahamas and Panama.
Life can throw a lot your way in the morning. You might be battling drop-off times, while your kids are battling imaginary monsters or their shoelaces. But no matter what life brings, Life cereal puts a smile on everyone's face. With 24 grams of whole grains and unexpected sweetness in every serving, it's sure to please even the pickiest eaters. Help start your mornings with Life cereal.
I really love my life.
Sam.
Dougie.
Aston Villa are in the midst of a mid-season collapse that most onlookers didn't believe possible for Unai Emery's previously ultra-impressive outfit. On today's episode of The Truth, we discuss what's going wrong and what the Villans can do to arrest this slump.
This weekend, Unai Emery said his Aston Villa team aren't surprising anymore, which raises the question, have Villa been found out?
Rolled out by Martinez, and then...
he's touched the ball with his hand and now...
It's going to be a spot kick.
Yeah, what? Tielemans, saved!
If I'm being perfectly honest, I really think Villa did anything well. We are in a little bit of a sorry state at the moment.
Evan Nielsen's header! He's got the goal that surely gets Bournemouth a point at Villa Park!
You cannot go 8 games without a win and your form not be heavily scrutinised.
Hello and welcome back to The Truth podcast with myself, Dougie Critchley, and Sam Tighe. Hello, Sam.
Hello, Dougie.
This is going to be potentially an interesting episode for Sam, but before we get into that, we're also joined by our brilliant producer and contributor, Mr. Jack Collins. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Dees. How you going?
I'm very well, thank you. Jack, we've got a little bit of a job on our hands today. We need to rebuild the self-esteem and psyche of Sam, whose club, like mine, Sunderland, to be fair, is struggling. So, Sam, let's start this, what could turn out to be a bit of a therapy session, by setting the scene. What exactly is going on with Aston Villa right now?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I've always been more of a Detroit Lions fan than an Aston Villa fan. No, it's rough. It's really rough, and it's very difficult to explain and to talk about. But to set the scene for those of you that haven't checked the table recently, although actually, even look at the table, it still doesn't look that bad, just because there's so little between like third or fourth and about 13th. So it still doesn't look too bad. But Villa are 8 games without a win. And the majority of these are losses. Some of them are really quite gut-wrenching losses as well, like comfortable losses, which, it just hasn't been a thing for a long time. Years, literally years. Villa have been extremely hard to beat, and most teams didn't manage it. And yet now you see games like the Chelsea one at the weekend, which were just pretty easy pickings. And this winless run of 8 games It is the longest winless run that Villa have been on since July 2020, which was the COVID summer where Villa survived relegation by the absolute skin of their teeth. Like last day, away to West Ham, eked out a draw, just about got away with it. So in terms of like representative form, that's actually where Villa are right now. And yes, you can look at that and say, wow, that doesn't tell the whole story. Sometimes it doesn't. But honestly, at the moment, it does. We'll get onto it. We'll talk about, what's gone wrong, the goals they're conceding. Goodness me. It really does look a lot like July 2020. It's bad.
Yeah, it hasn't been good at all. What I should have said at the start of the episode as well, we're recording this on a Tuesday before Villa's next game. So by this stage, you'll know the result of what went on between Aston Villa and Brentford. But to be honest, no matter what happens in that game, it's still worth a podcast about their recent slump because no one really saw it coming. On the 21st of September, they sat third after 4 wins in their opening 5 league games. But since then, just 1 win in 8 with 4 defeats and 3 draws. And those 3 defeats in their last 4 games have come against Spurs and Chelsea as well. So teams that should be around them and it should be competitive with them. What I would say, though, is for any Villa fan feeling pretty down at the moment, it's still so tight. So as we record this on Tuesday, they're only 4 points ahead of West Ham in 14th, but they're 3 points behind 6th place Forest. So European football is not off the table for next season, but if they continue on playing like this, it's going to be a struggle. And what is particularly disappointing is after winning their first 3 Champions League games. Well, I say particularly disappointing. I actually think their league campaign has been far worse than their Champions League campaign, of course, but they did win their first 3 in the Champions League. And then they lost to Club Brugge with that inexplicable penalty given away after Tyrone Mings picked up the ball. Then they drew against Juventus 0-0, which seems to be the only thing that Juventus do this season is draw 0-0. So they sit 9th in the Champions League, but they're only 3 points behind 2nd place Inter Milan. So they've still got a very good chance of qualifying from that. But they've got games against Leipzig, who've been dreadful in the Champions League so far, but then Monaco, who've been very good, and Celtic, who've been surprisingly good as well. So a reasonably difficult end to their Champions League campaign. But Sam, I suppose what makes this run of form at the moment so stark is, as you say, they haven't really shown this run of form since 2020 sort of time. And also last season, under Unai Emery, was probably close to perfect for a Villa fan, I imagine.
Yeah, you couldn't really argue with any of it. I'd categorise it as largely amazing as seasons go. It was a little bit of a slow start. With the Newcastle defeat on the opening day. It was 5-1. Tyrone Mings did his knee. Emi Buendia had done his knee on the eve of the season. Jacob Ramsey had broken his metatarsal on England duty in the under-21s in the summer. So it had the potential to spiral very quickly. And it looked like it was going to on that opening day against Newcastle, but rebounded really, really fast and exploded into life. And, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Villa winning 15 straight home games. Yeah, that was a remarkable record that, somewhat ironically, it was Sheffield United, one of the worst Premier League teams in history, were the ones that actually broke that streak. And it was Cameron Archer, the player that Villa sold to Sheffield United, that scored the goal that actually got the Blades to the point. But up until that, it had been 15 straight home wins that beat Arsenal and Manchester City in the space of 4 days, 1-0 each. And over the course of the season, 68 points, top 4, reached a European semi-final. Yeah, they flatlined a bit at the end, and the final day saw a 5-0 loss to Palace where just everybody was emotionally strung out. But, it was job done. Top 4 had been achieved mathematically. There was nothing to lose there. There was nothing on the line. And while you may think, what could a final day 5-0 defeat do in terms of bleeding into the following campaign? Obviously not a problem, because opened up with a win over West Ham, a very good performance, albeit a loss against Arsenal, several more wins, a famous victory against Bayern Munich at home in the Champions League. They actually won 9 of 13 to begin the season. Like, Arsenal were the only team that beat them in space of 13 games. So it obviously didn't have an effect, that final day at Selhurst Park, which makes it all the more baffling to watch it all fall apart in October.
Yeah, I think that's what is the troubling thing. And I suppose to continue the sort of chronological run of the build up to this season, I actually think a lot of the problems of this season stem from a summer business that seemed a little bit muddled, I would suggest, or that seemed at least very hamstrung by PSR concerns. So they sold Moussa Diaby, they sold Douglas Luiz, as well as selling youngsters like Archer and Oregbunam as well. They brought in Amadou Onana, Ian Matson, Cameron Archer, who was then instantly sold, Philogene, Illing Jr., who was then loaned out, Lewis Dobbin, who was loaned out, Berenacer, who was loaned out, and Ross Barkley. So their net spend was just £31.2 million, which, given the fact they were playing in the Champions League for the first time in their history, obviously not the European Cup, but the Champions League for the first time in their history, it didn't feel like the sort of summer that instilled a lot of belief that they were necessarily going to get a lot better than last year. I think there was maybe a possibility that they could maintain their level if they got lucky with injuries, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But it hasn't really materialised so far in terms of necessarily even maintaining that level. And, if you look at how their new signings performed, well, Moussa Diaby really tailed off towards the end of last year, but he still contributed 14 league goals. He was their 8th most used player. Douglas Luiz, again, by the end of the season, was he necessarily a first choice? Did he feel as important as he had in previous years? Probably not, but he still contributed 14 league goals. He was their 5th most used player. And then if you look at the league starts of players that they brought in, except for Onana, who started 10 games, they barely featured at all. Ian Maatson started once, Philogene twice, Barkley twice, and the rest of their summer signings, as I said, were instantly loaned out. And crucially, Boubacar Kamara only started his first league game versus Chelsea at the weekend, and we know how badly that went for Aston Villa as well. So Sam, am I right in thinking that their summer business, or your summer business, I should say, left yourselves a little, well, true, your club summer business left you a little bit exposed? Do you agree that it was a less than exciting, thrilling window?
Look, I think it was a case of hands are tied and everyone knows it. So it's difficult to get too mad at the process because you all know that the limitations that Villa were working under were pretty severe. There was a cluster of clubs, 5, I think, that were working furiously on June 29th and June 30th to figure a few things out. And Villa were one of them. And I think the takeaway from the summer, it was an unpopular takeaway, but I think it's proven to be the case. Villa actually managed to get stronger and deeper in terms of a squad using their business. But the first 11 got weaker. And there was no real hiding from that. Okay, Yuri Tielemans and Amadou Onana, they have a good relationship, both Belgian, both know each other from the national team, and they started the season really strongly. But even at its best, it is not as good as Douglas Luiz and Boubacar Kamara, one of which was sold, one of which was injured until very recently. There were a lot of Villa fans who were very happy to say goodbye to Douglas Luiz and just say, well, Tielemans is better anyway. And I was pretty puzzled by that take. I think it's extremely wrong. Douglas Luiz, by the end, was probably underrated by his own fan base just because, as you say, he did tail off a little bit, got suspended at the end, missed the Arsenal game. Tielemans came in, was brilliant as Villa won at the Emirates, kind of derailed Arsenal's title in the process and powered their own top 4 journey. But Tielemans was magnificent that day in the absence of Luiz. And that was enough for a lot of people to say, it's going to be fine. But yeah, that's the danger of recency bias. And, as we're seeing now, the durability of Douglas Luiz, his ability to play very, very well over and over and over again is missing from this team. And just recently, in the last couple of weeks, Tielemans has physically really, really flagged. He's dropped off from a very, very high level in those first 5 or 6 weeks to a level in which actually he looks really tired and really laboured. And I know he's been managing a bit of a groin injury. He missed international duty this time around to try and solve it. So I don't know how much of an effect that's having. But Villa, it really does prove the point that Villa ultimately, you'd think that they take the starting 11 of a team that qualified for the Champions League and make it stronger. That would be the natural progression point. Didn't happen. Got worse. It literally got worse.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to argue with for sure. And then I suppose we get into what's going on at the moment. And look, to start with the performance against Chelsea, I thought it was really lethargic, to be honest, just flat, not that much energy about it, not that much ingenuity about it on the ball, errors at the back. Pau Torres looked out of sorts, as he has for the last few weeks. I think Emi Martinez giving away the ball to Nicholas Jackson, even though it didn't result in a goal, just felt quite symptomatic of where Villa's head's at right now. There was far too much space for Enzo Fernandez for the second goal. There was poor marking for Jackson for the first goal. Cucurella winning that ball 50-50 way too easily for the first as well. Emi Martinez then gets injured. It was just a really difficult day for Aston Villa.
But
and I think it reflects...
This is just... It's like Groundhog Day. So this has been... every game is this for the last 6 weeks. Like, I've got a list of goals here that Villa have conceded since late October.
Go for it.
And I'm just going to start this off actually by saying that in late October, Villa played Bologna in the Champions League. This is before it started to go wrong. They absolutely battered them. 1-2-0, but it was one of those games where sometimes you watch a game and you see the other team at about 80 minutes and they've just lost hope and they've completely given up. Like, Bologna completely gave up. And I know they've not had the greatest season, so it's not the strongest team to measure them by. But Villa had pummeled them into submission to the point where they had just lost all will in that game. And I came out of that game thinking, wow, that was an absolute battering. An absolute battering. And then 3 or 4 days later, Villa play Bournemouth. And this is basically where it all starts. And I don't know if you haven't seen the end of the Villa Bournemouth highlights, then just go and watch it. This is where it starts. Villa are 1-0 up. There should be more, but they're not. They've missed a lot of chances. They've also had one ruled out for the ball going off the pitch by about an inch when Watkins passed them again. I don't know if you remember that one. It was very, very close, fine margins, but they should have put the game to bed. And then in the last 5 minutes, Bournemouth are trying to find something. And Villa give away the same foul, so a free kick, in the same area 3 times in 5 minutes. And they give Bournemouth the opportunity to fling the ball into the box from the same angle, same area of the pitch, 3 times in 5 minutes. It's Matty Cash and Ross Barkley committing the same foul over and over again. And this may seem like a small detail, but like I even got a text from a friend of mine who doesn't support Villa after watching, the highlights of watching Match of the Day, and was like, "You must have been going mad watching Cash and Barkley do that." Like, the definition of insanity is what they were doing. And on the third attempt, Evan Nilsson heads it home in the 95th minute, and it's a 1-1 draw. And that's the start of what has been the most ludicrous, like, cavalcade of errors that you would ever wish to see. Next up, they get run over by Spurs. Happens to anyone. Can happen. When Spurs hit form, no one in the league really
Man City
can live with them. It's not hard to beat Man City nowadays. Obviously, then you get the Club Brugge goal game, and Tyrone Mings picks the ball up in his own box, and Villa lose 1-0, give away the penalty. Not great. Liverpool lose 2-0, concede from their own attacking corner, nearly do it again, and then Diego Carlos passes the ball to Mohamed Salah on the halfway line, and he runs through and scores. Then you've got Palace conceding the 4th minute. Great start. They get to 1-1, equalise. You win a penalty to go 2-1 up. You miss it, and then you concede on the counter-attack that results from it, and you go 2-1 down. Just mental. Then there's the whole, it's all going against us. There's that relatively harsh 95th minute decision against Juventus where Rodgers' goal, the winner, is kind of ruled out. Where, depending on your viewpoint, you may think it's harsh, you may think it's fair, but it really compounds that feeling that nothing is going right. It's every week things are going wrong. And then you get to Chelsea. So, Dougie, when was the last time you saw a back pass? Like, what? Who does that?
It has been a while. I particularly enjoyed the indirect free kick. It always feels like a completely different sport with every player lined up on the goal line and Cole Palmer preparing just to whack it. It was actually a terribly taken free kick, but it was terrible. It was a lot of fun to see.
But it was like watching a penalty save. Actually, I thought, even though it was. Well, actually, was it harder or easier? I don't know. Another question for another day. But yeah, there's an indirect free kick in the box around back pass. And then Martinez looks at Nicholas Jackson for a good 2 seconds and opts to pass him the ball and then breaks his own finger recovering the situation. He's got a hairline fracture in his finger because of what he did. And so this is, what I have just described to you, it sounds like a blooper reel for an entire season. This is just November. That's it. It's just November.
Yeah.
Like how has all of this happened game after game after game after game in the space of 35 days? It has driven the fan base mad because it was mentally, you just cannot process it. This team did everything right for 2 years and is now doing everything wrong. Everything every possible mistake you could make on a pitch, they're doing it. Every single week is like a competition to one-up themselves in stupidity. I just don't get it.
I wish I had the answer. I mean, I want to bring in Jack on this because we've watched both of our teams, Sunderland and Fulham, have really difficult Premier League seasons where it feels like everything is going against you and you get into this kind of run where it's just mistake after mistake after mistake. As far as Villa are concerned, Jack, do you just think it's one of those things or do you think it's a sign of something more endemic to that side or are they set up wrong? What's your take on Villa at the moment?
I think the Chelsea game, and as Sam says, it has been a bit of a blooper reel of late, but I think the Chelsea game was about as bad as it gets, not because Chelsea aren't excellent, because they are, and we've spoken about that before, but because it kind of just felt really easy from a Chelsea perspective. And look, they might have stumbled on something quite special with Moises Caicedo inverting inside from right back and whatever. You can talk about all those things. But the fact is that this is still a Villa side. And yes, I agree with Sam that it is weaker than it was at the back end of last season. And losing Douglas Luiz, especially to a Juventus side who don't play him, is going to be one of those things that's frustrating. And yes, PSR had hands tied, and I can understand why some of these deals happened. But ultimately, we come to a kind of point where, at what point does it become a poison chalice to be playing not just 6 Champions League games now, but 8 in the group stages? You have to expand your squad. And last season, I thought Villa coped relatively admirably with the Conference League. The question mark would have been, could you kick on and win that? And would it have been something to go and win that trophy in a way that you can't see Villa going and winning the Champions League in this campaign? I'm kind of at that point with them where I think it will come good. And I think that Unai Emery has got enough credit in the bank to not necessarily worry about it for the time being. But there is also this kind of sense that it feels a little bit stuck in flux. And until something changes, and I don't know what that is yet, I don't know what you do there to sort of fix things immediately. I can see Emery trying to change things, but he keeps doing this thing where Morgan Rogers is pushed out to the wing in order to accommodate John McGinn playing through the centre. And he is, in so many ways, Morgan Rogers, one of those players that was exceptional coming through the centre earlier in the campaign and playing off a striker. He looks far less like he's going to cause problems off the wing. John McGinn is a wonderful player and one of my favourite players in the Premier League, but at the moment doesn't seem to be cooking in that gap in the way that maybe you'd expect. There's been certain players in terms of Leon Bailey who hasn't really reached that form that we were expecting him to carry on from maybe the first half of last season, maybe not all of it. But when you're kind of looking at this team and where they are, Luca Dean coming back in, obviously Ian Martson was brought in the summer. They tried to move on before with Alex Moreno from Luca Dean. And it feels like Villa are sort of back a little bit where they were a year and a half ago. And considering the progress that had been made last season, it is kind of one of those things. It's quite hard to nail down exactly where they're going and exactly what the kind of next steps are to fix this. You know, Emi Buendia coming off the bench, Robin Olsen coming off the bench. These are players who were part of Villa squads who were far less important and far less, accomplished than this squad under Emery last year. And in so many ways, it feels when I'm watching these things and watching some of these players come on. And Ross Barkley was a good signing on a free, but is he better than what Villa had before? Not for my money, even if he had a good year at Luton last year. I just feel like Villa have just regressed a tad, and that's okay. And, as you said at the top, Dukes, it's all right for them to be a couple of points off the top 6 right now. European football is not out of the question. And Villa, I don't think will be sitting there expecting to qualify for the Champions League week in, week out, or year in, year out. But it is quite hard to watch that element of regression, I think, that we all thought had maybe been left behind in the previous season.
Yeah, I think everyone has been very quick to blame the Champions League, a bit of a go-to culprit. I think there's some merit in it. There's an element to this which is that for a long time now, a year and a half, basically, Villa have played a game every 3 days. They did so last year by the end with about 14 players, and they really hung on for dear life. Then a lot of these players went away and obviously played quite deep into summer tournaments. Ollie Watkins scoring a semi-final winner for England, Ezri Konsa being involved in that too. Emi Martinez wins the Copa America again. Yeah, there's a lot of mileage in these legs, and I would imagine there's also an extra amount of pressure. An expectation upon these shoulders now that some of these players are probably not used to. And that brings in, yes, physical fatigue, but I think mental fatigue as well is a factor. Emery is a very intense coach. I think Emery ball, if you allow me to call it that, is quite difficult to maintain over long periods. That's not me saying like it's crumbling. But I think mental fatigue is a real factor here. And how else do you explain, for example, Morgan Rogers, such an electric start to the season. What a wonderful year he's had. Guys, for the last 5 weeks, he's been useless. And it's not just because he's moved over to the left. That was an attempt to try and do something else. His touch has completely abandoned him. Like the ball is like ballooning off his toe at the most random points. And for me, that's mental fatigue. And for me, that's a case for Morgan Rogers to step out of the team for a week or two, particularly if you have other options. And I know that like Jacob Ramsey's injury may have played with that and forced, but like Jack, your point about Emi Buendia feeling like a blast from the past in the wrong way is very fair. But also, he's probably sat there like, what have I got to do to get a game here? Because none of these guys are doing it right now. And I've been very kind to Rodgers because it's very obvious that he's a great player and he's got great potential. But sometimes you can see that mental fatigue creeping into players and it affecting their form. And I think there's a couple here, Watkins, Rodgers, Konsa, usually very, very good, very consistent, really struggling. And when the spine of your team is feeling fatigued and jaded, how do you recover from that? It's very tough, right? And I'm sure that Emery's response is to take even longer meetings. Might not be the right way of doing it, you know? It's like, you know, when Ronaldo goes on a scoring drought, so he stays longer at the training ground and practices shooting more. Sometimes that's counterproductive. Do you understand what I mean? Sometimes you do need a little bit of freshness of mind rather than overdoing it. I worry a little bit that Unai Emery's kind of way of thinking and way of doing things, which I generally applaud, in these situations becomes the wrong thing to do, or kind of it feels like overkill to a point, and you need to take a step back rather than a step forward.
Yeah, you know what they need? It sounds like they need a trip to Dubai. That place can do magic for some teams.
Absolutely. I was thinking the other day, because Villa have actually got quite a lot of the same problems as Manchester City. They have a midfield configuration that isn't quite working. They've got huge problems at right back, and they're struggling to control games, and they're very vulnerable in transition. I was just thinking maybe have two managers ever swapped for a month? Can you do like a job swap? You know, like when those shows where the neighbours used to swap houses and decorate each other's houses. Could we do like Unai Emery takes City for December and Pep takes Villa for December? See if they can figure out each other's problems. Because actually they're very similar. Sometimes it just takes a fresh set of eyes to find a solution from within.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying definitely for that idea, but it does sometimes need a different set of eyes. I mean, the difficulty about Villa is that they've got 7 games in the next 27 days. They've got Brentford, which you know the result of already. Then they've got Southampton at home, RB Leipzig away, Forest away, City at home, Newcastle away, and Brighton at home. I think that's a really difficult run of fixtures. You know, only Southampton and RB Leipzig, because of how poorly they're playing, are straightforward games, I'd say.
Man City as well.
Yeah, Man City. Well, yeah, they've been very poor. But
you know, it's
let's see by the end of December what sort of state they're in. What I would say about Villa is that they have had a very difficult run of games as well. You know, United, Fulham, Bournemouth, Spurs, Liverpool, Palace, Chelsea. Mind you, I say that. Does it just feel like every game, bar about 4 in the Premier League right now, is really, really difficult? So when you're playing poorly,
it's just life in the Premier League. My big takeaway from this season is the Champions League is way easier than the Premier League, which doesn't seem to make sense at surface level. But like the Champions League games have been so much easier than your run-of-the-mill Premier League game. Like what people would imagine in their minds to be to what Ipswich looks like in terms of how difficult it is. Sorry, but like Juve played better. It's absolutely crazy. The run has been, it's not been particularly forgiving, but I'm not sure you can call it anything other than par for the course in the Premier League. I think that the detail here is that Villa, for a very long time under Emery, the superpower was to go ahead. If you go ahead in a game, it's obviously infinitely easier because, coming back from a goal down is hard. It's a low scoring sport, but also you control game state, right? You're able to manage game. You're able to manage tempo. Villa were superb at taking early leads and then going from there. And actually, on the rare occasion they did concede first during the very strong era, did I just call it an era? The very strong period, Villa actually responded very poorly to going behind. Now, Villa are going behind very often, right? Constantly letting the opponents get their noses in front, and it's completely flipped from what it was before. And a little stat for you, 4 goals conceded in the opening 10 minutes of games this season for Villa. Only West Ham and Wolves have conceded more during this period. So a bit of a backbreaker, and of late as well, like recently, we've seen quite a few of these. Like both games against Palace recently conceded in the first 10 minutes, one more as well, and Liverpool was 20. And another stat for you as well, and this kind of basically just tells you how difficult it's been at both ends. Second most big chances missed in the league with 30. Chance creation, not a problem, but constantly putting yourself on the back foot and then missing all your chances to draw yourself level. And unfortunately, Ollie Watkins is a big culprit here. I think he has 13 or 14 big chances missed already this season. That's roughly one a game. It's not good at all. How are you supposed to win in games that naturally fly quite close to the margins because of the sort of random, chaotic, but also level nature of the Premier League right now, outside of, your Liverpool and Arsenal echelon?
Yeah, that'll do it for sure. That'll make you struggle.
Sometimes words seem so unnecessary. Introducing Unspoken, the new diamond fashion collection you'll only find at Jared Jewelers, and just in time for the holidays. Discover the brilliance of natural diamond pendants, rings, earrings, and bracelets in a range of carat weights, expertly interwoven in white or yellow 14-karat gold. It's the perfect holiday gift where your love speaks for itself. Unspoken, the dazzling new collection, exclusively at Jared.
Parents, did you know that only 50% of U.S. adults are financially literate? Millions of people don't fully understand how to manage money, and it's up to you to not let your kids grow up into that statistic. With Greenlight's educational money app and parent-controlled debit card, you can teach them how to earn, save, and invest wisely. The earlier they learn, the better prepared they'll be to manage their money and build a financially secure life. Give your kids the financial edge they need. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast. That's greenlight.com/podcast.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
I think I've got a couple of points that I want to kind of take us on to next. I mean, we've kind of already covered them, but not maybe in these exact words. That was this drop-off sort of to be expected, looking at recent history? Newcastle finishing third in 22-23. They finished 7th last season with 11 fewer points. Spurs, again, a side that hadn't really been in the Champions League for a few years. They finished 4th for the first time in 3 years in 21-22. They finished 6th with 11 fewer points in 22-23. You can go even further back to Leicester. Obviously they lost key players that summer that they won the league. N'Golo Kante left, but they finished 12th the following year. But they did make the knockouts of the Champions League. Is Villa's squad right now Champions League quality and also able to contend for European football in the same season? I'm not so sure. Villa finished 14th in 21-22. And of their 17 most used players when they finished 14th, 10 are still at the club. That includes their 5 most used players from that season, which were Cash, Emi Martinez, Mings, McGinn, and Watkins. And in the case of Emi Martinez, McGinn, and Watkins, they've really elevated their game. They now look like players that can play way above the level of 14th. And maybe Villa were drastically underperforming in that season, I think it's fair to say as well. But they have leapt up various levels very, very quickly because of Unai Emery's brilliance and some key players really exploding. Watkins having the season of his life last year, was one of the most lethal forwards, not just in the Premier League, but in the entirety of Europe. Was this inevitable? And we've touched on the downfall or the downgrade of Leon Bailey, and we've touched on Morgan Rogers' recent form as well. But I think there's a sort of maybe a lack of creativity in their side, I think is particularly fair as well. At the moment, there's no Aston Villa player that averages more than 4 shot creating actions per 90. So that's either the shot or the pass that leads to the shot in the Premier League. So no more than 4. And there are 30 players in the Premier League that do. So you'd really hope one Villa player would definitely be in there as well. And it feels like, watching the Chelsea game in particular, we've talked about the mental fatigue, But the physical fatigue is definitely there as well. There's a lack of energy in that side. Only Chelsea and Nottingham Forest have completed fewer tackles in the opposition third this season. And only Everton, Nottingham Forest and Ipswich have a higher passes per defensive action than Villa's 13. So the amount of passes they allow their opposition to play amongst themselves before they engage, before they go and make a tackle or make an interception. So they're sitting off teams in a way that they've never done before, and they aren't pressing either. So they are just inviting so much more pressure onto a line that is notoriously high, and it feels like they are just shooting themselves in the foot right now.
Dougie, I'll just step in there a sec, because Villa didn't really press last year either. I think it was a concerted decision based on the volume of games that were probably going to have to be played. 38 in the league. Presumably you get quite far in the Conference League plus the 2 cups. I think on balance, Emery decided we don't have the energy to press, so we're not going to do that. But they're very compact. So they played high line, no press, but very, very compact, and said you can go wide, you can go over us, but we have the best offside line in the league and possibly the best sweeper in the league as well in goal. And if you like, we'll give you high value chances. You probably get 2 1-on-1s a game, and you'll always be able to cross against us. But if you do actually manage to score, then fair play to you, because it's still really difficult because of the personnel. We'll catch you offside. Emi Martinez will save the day. That happened over and over and over again. That was an obvious game plan, and I think it was to do with the volume of games. Villa still don't press
at all.
However, they are no longer compact. The defensive shape, the structure, is awful. They've changed the build-up shape. I don't know why. It was a 3-2 structure, like what you see from Arsenal and from Manchester City, where basically you end up with a back 3 and then 2, so you get 5 in build-up. That was happening quite a lot last season. Not happening now. It's like a proper wide 4, and it leaves really big gaps, and no one can really understand why Villa have decided to move to this structure. Because when you do lose the ball, all the players are so far away from each other. It's creating so many problems structurally in terms of transition. And then also, they're not controlling games properly either. I do think this is another concerted move, because I think Emery has decided that actually what he wants to do is play more direct into the likes of Rodgers. Because you don't want Rodgers having the ball like 50, 60 times a game. You want Rodgers to spin his man and go, right? And then Watkins is running the channel, Bailey's running into space. The style that Emery has chosen for Villa this season is drastically different to last season, but he has chosen it. I think it's by design. And it's left a couple of people going, but why? I don't know why. And it can't be that, we don't have Douglas Luiz anymore. We can't possibly control a game. No way. Can't be that simple, because that's wrong. It must be to do with the fact that the squad that's been built is very physical and very direct. Look at Onana when he runs through midfield with the ball. Look at the way Rodgers moves. Look at the way Bailey and Watkins run. Feels like it's by design. Also feels like it's not working.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, to wrap up the sort of podcast, I think it's only fair, it's only right, and probably the most interesting part of this, to talk about the future. What is going to happen in the future? Where are Villa going to finish? Are they going to get out of this? How do they get out of this, if so? I mean, Jack, I kind of want to bring you back in on this. Given their current situation, is this just what are we now, December, November slump? Is this something deeper? Where do you see Villa finishing this season, first of all? And if they were to get out of this slump, what do you think is the best method of getting out of their slump? Do they have to go big in January, for example?
I don't know if they can go big in January, I think is the truth of the matter. And the fact is that there are issues with this current PSR system. And I think that, Villa are probably feeling the sharper teeth of that than maybe some other clubs. And look, in some ways, they're disruptors, right? And ultimately, they have been the club over the last sort of 14 months who have disrupted the top order. Newcastle did it before that, and Newcastle slumped last season off the back of it and are having PSR issues. There are similarities that you can draw in these two things. And look, obviously you can talk about the money at Newcastle. Sometimes people forget that there's a lot of money at Aston Villa as well. And they were a very, very rich club. And that could be invested in a different world, which doesn't have such tight regulations. Now, I think Sam's probably onto something there, that this is something that Emery has designed. And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a brilliant thing. And right now, obviously, it doesn't look like it's working in the way that Villa fans would be hoping, and they're hoping it would pan out. But if this is a system that he is trying to design for a long haul, then I would stick with Unai Emery. It's not, rocket science to look at it and think there is one of the best managers on the planet. And if he has a design, even if in the short term there's going to be pain with that, in the long term, you would imagine that Emery has a system that is going to work out. And it might take another season for us to see the fruition of it. And it's interesting what Sam says there in terms of, Morgan Rodgers and wanting to become more direct and give up a little bit of the controlled possession that was a bit of a feature across the last year. You look at, back to Emery's Villarreal side that did cause headaches and nosebleeds in Europe. And they were incredibly direct. They played a very, very similar style in terms of what they were trying to do in those areas and trying to punch through teams in kind of concerted blasts. The problem is that right now it doesn't feel like the personnel necessarily fit exactly what he's trying to do. And he's sort of trying to work with this sort of mishmash of different players from different eras, in inverted commas, of his time there or of the time before him. And that point you made about there being a lot of players left over, this is not a squad with loads and loads of turnover, means that there are probably issues with trying to move to a new system when you've got players who are used to playing in the old. So do I think it's going to turn around immediately? No. Do I think Villa are going to be fine this season? Yes. And I wouldn't rule out the idea that Villa can get into these Champions League knockout stages and will be a club that nobody wants to play because in short bursts, I think they have the capacity to almost undo anybody on their day. But what does that look like in the long term? I imagine it looks like a little bit more of a rebuild next summer in order to organise this team into what Emery wants it to be in exactly the way that he wants and to play the system that he seems to be turning towards.
Nice. I think that was very succinct, made a lot of sense. Sam, we will have a lot of Villa fans listening to this podcast, maybe more than have listened to The Truth so far. I want you to say something positive that they can cling on to for the upcoming period of games. We talked about it before. They got 7 games in the next 27. Do you see it turning around? Give me some positivity to finish this quite negative episode on.
Yeah, you were right in saying that it was a bit of a therapy session. Reading out that list of goals, the nature of the goals conceded was interesting. It made me feel some things. And some positivity to finish this off. Look, first of all, Villa already, it feels like Villa have conceded an entire season's worth of silly goals. So odds are that will stop relatively soon. And there will be a game where just about nothing goes wrong. As wild as that sounds right now, considering what we're watching, it will soon abate. It has to. The odds are that it will. And there have been a couple of games here in this run that could easily have been so much better. Bournemouth should have been a comfortable win. Palace, convert that penalty to go 2-1 up. You're probably going to win that game. Again, it's the margins of football, and you can fall the wrong side of them for weeks and weeks and weeks and sometimes months, and then suddenly it will shift and it will change. Jack, I feel like Fulham did something quite similar this season. Early doors, the nonsense you lot were producing on a weekly basis was bringing a tear to my eye, and suddenly it just kind of shifted, right? And it was suddenly you're on the right side of that silliness. And there's another fan base out there going, God, why does this always happen to us? It will move on and it will change. And the fact that Villa have missed the second most big chances in the league this season suggests to me that chance creation is not a problem. And so when the forwards begin to regress to the mean and find their shooting boots, this won't be so much of a problem either. If chance creation is okay and the errors can be cut out somewhat, Villa will eventually level out. And as we keep saying, there really isn't a lot in it. Like, as bad as all of this has seemed, 1 point off the European places, not an awful lot of ground has been lost on many of these teams, despite the fact that for 6 weeks, Villa have looked like a bonfire. So that in itself is a bit of a superpower. Yes, they've been poor. Yes, they've dropped loads of points. So have others. Others have dropped loads of points. Tottenham have lurched from the absolute sublime to the absolute ridiculous. Manchester United still feel very untested. Brentford can't. I shouldn't say that because they can't win away from home. They got Villa on Wednesday. We'll see how that one goes. But all of these teams have their problems, have their flaws. It'll all wrap back around. So for Villa, it's a case of patience. It's really hard to take on the chin right now because, as I said, for about 2 years, Villa did everything right. And right now, it's the complete opposite. But this can't carry on forever. No one's looking at this squad and saying, oh, could be in trouble here. Everyone's looking at this squad of players, this collection of talent and going, matter of time before they snap out of it. And Unai Emery will be given all the patience in the world because he's surrounded by his guys and surrounded by stability. So I would say it is quite simply a matter of time. And there's a couple of stats there that will support that rather than just, hopes and prayers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think given your recent history as well, jumping up and down divisions, how bad it got under Steven Gerrard, a season in which you finish, say, 10th and beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League. I mean, that's a great memory for anyone to hold on to for the next 10, 20 years or so. So there's been joy amongst the sort of recent chaos of the season, but you've definitely got enough player quality, individual player quality to turn it around and turn it around fast. Any final thoughts, Jack, to add? Are you all good?
No, honestly, I think Villa will be fine. I just think that this season might end up being a little bit of a slog, especially with those PSR constraints holding one hand behind their back. But ultimately, when you kind of look, as you say, where Villa have been in the last couple of years and now feel that they're back where they should be or where they belong. And obviously that's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but Villa are back in those conversations for European football, even if they're a couple of points off at the moment. They're back in the Champions League. They beat Bayern at home. They've had some massive wins. Like, it's not all doom and gloom. And if anyone's going to turn this around, I would 100% have faith in it being Unai Emery. So I don't think there's loads to worry about. Just this season might be one where you have to just get through it before a new kind of pieces are added to the puzzle and things start to look, much brighter again.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a good chance that they've beaten Brentford on Wednesday. They've then got Southampton at home this weekend, and they've got winless RB Leipzig next week in the Champions League. So it could turn around incredibly fast. But guys, that has been...
3 wins in a row, you just promised me.
Come on. I'll do it for you guys as long as you promise to get Sunderland's form back on track and we can call it evens. But guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Truth. I think Sam feels about 3 stone lighter, having got all that emotion out of him. Big thanks to Jack Collins as well.
Thank you, Dougie. Always a pleasure.
Sam, a pleasure as always. Enjoy the next few weeks as a Villa fan, hopefully. That sounded pretty terrified. Fair enough, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Sometimes words seem so unnecessary. Introducing Unspoken, the new diamond fashion collection you'll only find at Jared Jewelers, and just in time for the holidays. Discover the brilliance of natural diamond pendants, rings, earrings, and bracelets in a range of carat weights, expertly interwoven in white or yellow 14-karat gold. It's the perfect holiday gift where your love speaks for itself. Unspoken, the dazzling new collection, exclusively at Jared. Did you know adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't? From swimming lessons to piano classes, as parents, we invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But how much are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids essential skills like earning, saving, and investing, giving them the tools for financial confidence. This investment costs less than an after-school treat at Starbucks. Start prioritizing their financial education today with Greenlight. Invest in their future at greenlight.com/podcast.
Final seconds of the game. A chance to score, and the chance has gone begging. If your business's commerce platform keeps missing the target on golden opportunities, get the MVP you deserve. Get Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool that you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed football boots from Shopify's in-person POS system, or you're vending vintage shirts on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. What I love about Shopify is how, no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com
shopify.com/ranks to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/ranks.